Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I formally declare open this council meeting of Colac Otway Shire Council on 24th of March 2021. Can I ask that you all stand for the opening prayer? Almighty God, we seek your blessing and guidance in our deliberations on behalf of the people of the Colac Otway Shire. Enable this council's decision to be those that contribute to the true welfare and betterment of our community. Amen. I would like to start this afternoon by acknowledging the traditional custodians and lawmakers of this land, their elders past and present, and welcome any descendants here today. I would like to advise that all council meetings are audio recorded and live streamed, with the exception of confidential matters. This includes the public participation section of meetings. The live stream recording of this afternoon's meeting will be placed on the website as soon as practicable. By participating in open council meetings, individuals consent. Sorry, this is cutting in and out. That might be better. By participating in open council meetings, individuals consent to the use and disclosure of information they share at the meeting, including any personal and/or sensitive information. Please note that it is an offence to make an unauthorised recording of the meeting. Can I ask that council staff record all those present today? Okay, there's no apologies. Now moving on to question time. Colac Otway Shire encourages community input, and integral to this is the opportunity to provided to ask questions at council meetings. A maximum of 30 minutes is allowed for question time. I'll start by indicating that I received questions in writing from Mr. James Judd, Miss Mary Drup, Miss Jenny Barrett, Mr. Prabha Kati and Mr. David Walsh. Following that, I will then invite other questions from community members present. Can I get an indication of whether Mr. Judd is here? Miss Drup is here. Miss Barrett? Not here. Mr. Kati? I don't think he's here. And Mr. Walsh? You hear Mr. Walsh? No. Anyone who is not in attendance will not have questions read out in accordance with Council's governance rules. I'll now read questions from Mr. James Judd Colac. When will the Colac Otway Shire Council pick up the urgent need to improve the pedestrian crossing on the east side of Queen Street, Murray Street in Colac, with no safety mid-road and the very short north-south light cycle that makes it hard to half cross Murray Street before lights change? I think it's the... This might be better. Plus the east side is on a sharp downhill slope to the east, or do we have to wait until a fatality first? Response from General Manager Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor and Mr. Judd, thanks for bringing this to our attention. Installation and operation of a pedestrian island or changing of the signalling is the responsibility of Regional Roads Victoria, as both roads are managed by them. Colac Otway Shire is happy to raise the issue and will do so with Regional Roads Victoria at one of the regular meetings we have with that organisation to help progress the change, or they can be contacted directly by you.
Question number 2. How much interest was paid and how much accrued in the 2019-2020 financial year on funds rated by the Colac Otway Shire from staff reserve funds to make a payment of a call on council to top up the discontinued defined benefit superannuation fund? Plus, what is the interest rate paid on outstanding balances until repaid in full? Also, have council officers looked into if council went to the market to borrow funds, so any balance outstanding would be repaid in full? So would the cost to borrow new funds be as expensive as that now paid on funds borrowed from staff reserves?
Thank you for the question. There was no call on council to top up the defined benefit superannuation fund. Therefore, there was no money borrowed and no interest paid.
Thank you. Question 3 from Mr. Judd. Is it still the intention of the Colac Otway Shire Council to extend the centre strip in Murray Street, Colac, from Corangamite Street down to Armstrong Street on the same basis that exists between Corangamite and Queen Street in Colac, then turn Murray Street into 2 one-way streets with no option between crossroads for traffic to move from one side to the other, when this section will include at least 3 major developments and other businesses on both sides of Murray Street? So to do business with businesses on both sides of Murray Street could cause at least a 2-block detour, plus time wasted to move from one side of the street to the other, then find a new parking place. Response from General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, and Mr. Judd, thanks for raising this issue. We don't intend for that to be the result. Designs have been prepared for upgrades to the section of Murray Street from Corangamite Street to Armstrong Street. The intention is to install a centre median and tree planting similar to the Queen Street to Corangamite Street section. A vehicle turning brake is included in the median between Scott and Hart Streets. Now, these upgrades are currently unfunded. However, should the project proceed, the median and other aspects of the design will be reviewed and updated to accommodate safe turning movements in and out of businesses and parking areas, with additional brakes added if required.
Question 4. When will the Colac Otway Shire Council give a definite date to the community of when the toilet upgrade works at Memorial Square in Colac will actually be done, and cease delaying by saying once we have produced plans and released them to the public for comment, then we will have some idea of the needs and will then seek funds to build them. Then once funds received, we will be able to consider construction, as this could be in the never future, when Council has been aware since at least 2 full-time CEOs back that these facilities are not a size to meet the demands on them, plus has often received numerous follow-up complaints and nothing done to improve these facilities since their construction. Response from General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, the project to design the Memorial Square and Hesse Street public toilet facilities is in progress, with draft designs to be released for public comment in the coming months. The next phase of the project involves consideration by councillors of cost implications for the design before committing to specific options. Substantial work has been done to date to understand the demand and usage patterns, location options, building upgrade feasibility for Hesse Street, an investigation of parking and access options to service the facilities. Both facilities are currently operational, and Council continues to maintain them regularly as the replacement and upgrade project progresses.
Final question from Mr. Judd. When will the Colac Otway Shire Council spend time and money to improve the very poor drainage systems provided in this municipality in all urban areas and new subdivisions to provide for a much larger population? Is it no joke when entrances into developed areas blocked due to flooding because drains too small to take runoff away? Far too often roads and footpaths are blocked because flooding in high places due to the shocking drainage systems. Response from General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Judd, for the question. Council has a recurrent annual drainage renewal program and in the 2021 financial year, Council will spend $340,000 on renewal and upgrade of drainage infrastructure across the Shire, which is carried out in addition to minor maintenance and repairs. Council is aware of the increased frequency of localised flooding and considers these factors in the design of the drainage network. A number of roads have been identified in the current and coming years as priorities for design and renewal or upgrade based on the frequency and severity of flooding and the condition of the drainage assets. The Colac Stormwater Development Plan also gives us guidance on the existing drainage hotspots that require attention in Colac, and these works total some $8 million. In addition to this, and in relation to new development, there are two key factors. The first is that the new development in Colac to realise the Colac 2050 vision will be guided by the Colac Stormwater Development Plan, and this gives us guidance on the location and type of major stormwater infrastructure which will be required, such as stormwater retention and treatment. The second is that the drainage for new developments is designed by experienced and qualified engineers, and those designs are reviewed by Council's engineers who have the big picture in their minds. In this way, we can be assured that the provision of drainage in the future will be well aligned with best practice.
Thank you. I now have a question from Mary Drackup from Forest. I write to ask Council to please consider very carefully using a deliberative consultation process with a representative community panel to help develop its forthcoming Council plan. I recently took part in such a process with Infrastructure Victoria in a 4-week online 200-member panel that deliberated broadly, deeply and respectfully on a wide range of issues relevant to the subject and resulted in 21 recommendations being presented to the state government. Diverse membership of the panel was ensured by prospective members completing a survey giving their age, gender, job, cultural background and postcode before being selected to participate. Provided the process is expertly facilitated, I feel confident that this method would provide an excellent opportunity for the Council to tap into the breadth and depth of experience, creativity and common sense of its ratepayers as it grapples with the complex and important issues impacting on the development of our Shire over coming decades. Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor. Thanks for the question. As per the Local Government Act 2020, Council is required to undertake deliberative community engagement in the development of its key strategic plans, including the Community Vision and Council Plan. This aligns to Council's recently adopted Community Engagement Policy 2021. Deliberative engagement can come in a variety of forms. A report is being presented to this afternoon's Council meeting for Council to consider how it will most appropriately undertake deliberative engagement for its new Community Vision and Council Plan. Following the consideration of the report, the community will be informed of the process that Council will undertake to further engage with our community to develop these key strategic documents.
Thank you. Now moving on to questions from the gallery. Can I have a show of hands so I can get an understanding of how many people would like to ask questions? Okay. To ensure that everyone has the opportunity to ask questions, I may need to limit the number of questions from each person to 2. Then once everyone has had an opportunity to ask their initial questions, and if time permits, I will invite further questions. Please note that whilst we will do our best, it may not be possible to answer all questions without notice tonight. If this is the case, they will be answered later. Before we proceed, I'll remind everyone in the gallery that you must ask a question. No preamble or introduction to questions will be permitted. If you do not ask a question, you will be asked to sit down and the next person will be invited to ask a question. I think I saw Mr. Webber's hand up. Would you like to ask a question?
Tony Webber, Otway Forum. Is it correct that the council purchased two-way radios and that they turned out to be non-operational?
CEO will answer that.
Not sure what's going on. Thank you for the question, Mr. Webber, and through the Mayor. Council went through a process, I think in 2018, where it purchased a radio system. It had a number of difficulties with that system, including the provider of that system went into bankruptcy. Council then has had a considerable period of time since then to try and work through what it should do. We're currently evaluating an alternative system and working through with our service and operations staff to ensure that they can provide a good service, but also that it is safe and can be in times of emergency that the system will work. That evaluation is continuing, and we would hope to be presenting to Council later this month at a briefing about what we're doing, and then we can then provide more concrete advice as to where we're going with this system into the future.
Thank you. How much did the radios cost? Do you have a...
I'd ask if one of the other officers has a more exact figure, but it was certainly the original system over a 10-year period was going to cost us well over $1 million. That was going to be paid progressively down over that time. We've with the system we're evaluating at the moment, if that's successful, the cost will be greatly reduced. But because of the bankruptcy of the firm, there is still going to be some cost to Council. We haven't finally determined that, but we have previously reported in our financial statements and our quarterly financial reports to Council that our preliminary estimations are in the order of $380,000 that it would potentially cost Council, but we haven't been able to finalise that at this point.
Thank you, and thanks for putting the papers back in the foyer. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Webber. Now, who else had their hand up for? I can't see everybody, so Jill, you're going to have to help me. Yes, the person behind Tony Webber.
Hi, I'm Blake Connor. I had a couple questions regarding two things: the proposal to close Old Coach Road in Skeens Creek and the proposal to put bollards at the end of Surf Avenue in Skeens Creek. The first question is, when I am forced to drive a tractor that's only does 25 k's an hour up the Great Ocean Road and up Skeens Creek Road unnecessarily, who's going to be held liable if there's an accident?
Yeah, CEO.
Thank you for the question. The issue is about to be considered by Council, so I can't go into what decision Council is going to make. But in terms of liability, any liability in relation to road use is borne by the road user and that system. So, I mean, I think the question that you ask is very difficult to answer in this forum.
It will be the people that vote for it personally held liable, I'm telling you that now, because I don't consent to that road being closed. It's where I use it on a daily basis, if not multiple times a day, if not, I've probably been up the road 60 or 70 times per day in some cases. It's a major safety issue. Why pull out onto the Great Oceans? And this is my other question. Why would you want someone, and not just one person, not just me, why would you want any contractor that needs to get from anywhere out near Wangara to the top of Skeens Creek to go up, as I believe you can't get up Hickey's Cutting and Old Coach Road would be closed, so you're going to have to go up the Skeens Creek Road. Why would you want to force them to go up that road?
So,
the proposal before council doesn't envisage closing the road. Are you aware that the proposal before council talks about putting in automatic gates?
So what's the point of the gates? Like, does that mean you just drive straight through and they open automatically?
That's correct.
Okay, so that seems just like a waste of money to me personally, but maybe I'm just stupid.
Okay. That's an item before council tonight. So have you got one last question about it? Will you? I mean, I guess the question you'd have asked is, can you drive? Will you be able to drive a tractor down it? Is that what you're sort of?
No, I know I can drive a tractor up and down it. I've done it before. That's not a drama. It's a good place to take a tractor up and down. I just think it's a whole lot safer to drive a tractor up and down it. I've spoken to a couple of contractors that have worked previously down there and do work down there currently, and they use that road a lot to save taking machinery up and down the Skeens Creek Road because they believe it is unsafe.
Okay. We've answered the two questions you've asked, and so this is an item before consideration for councillors tonight. So thank you very much for your questions.
Yeah, I just wanted to put that out there so you know what the issues are before you all go and say yes, we'll do it, because I'm an asshole and I'll admit it, but I will make sure if there is an accident because of that, whoever voted on it will be held personally liable. Thank you.
Thank you. Who else had their hand up? Simon, Mr. Arundel.
Simon Arundel, Bungadore. Have you been reading your newspapers and watching your television over the last few months? Countries ripped apart, fighting for their democracy. Hong Kong, Syria, Myanmar. Why does this council persist in destroying our democracy here, in that you won't allow councillors the freedom to talk up about any issue they think they should talk about? Why are you so adamant in destroying our democracy? And if you go ahead with this, how can you go to an Anzac Day parade or Remembrance Day gathering? You will stand there as traitors to what all those men fought for. When are you going to...
Oh, sorry, Mr. Arundel, do you have a question? I might try and answer that one for you. I think you're referring to the Councillor Code of Conduct. The Code of Conduct is just it's a document really about how the councillors conduct itself. It's not about restricting what councillors can say. Councillors are very free to speak on about why they voted for things, about things that they're interested in. I think the Code of Conduct just really is a document that's around conducting themselves in a respectful manner. It's not about restricting councillors at all.
So, Mr. Arundel, Council each quarter reports on its financial operations and the work that it does. Expecting that in the May Council meeting there will be a report on the quarter finishing in March, and a part of that report will include an outline of the fund that Council considered to assist businesses. And the information will be provided at that point.
Thank you, Mr. Arundel. Now, there's other people that had their hand up. Can I just... Yes, sorry, the lady, I can't quite see you, with the red top on, if you'd like to come up. State your name and where you're from would be great, thanks.
My name's Joyce Biddle and I'm from Skeens Creek. I have questions about, firstly, the petition that's been reissued to the council. It seems ironic to me that I've heard there's 76 signatures on both of those petitions. Has anybody bothered to check that they haven't just been photocopied? Signatures twice. Has anyone checked?
Thank you for the question. I think this is an issue that we need to be quite careful about and considered about. And I caution you about the statements or the implied statement in your question. Council has in front of it a petition to consider. We believe that it has been lodged legitimately and we will consider it. But Council will be considering the core issues of the petition, not the fact that 76 or 70 people or whatever signed it. So that the Council tonight will be considering the core issues at heart, and that's a matter that will transpire in the next 30 minutes.
But have you checked a photocopy that those signatures haven't just been photocopied? It seems ironic to me that there's the same number of signatures on both of those petitions.
We believe that the petition has been legitimately presented and we're considering on that basis tonight. We're happy to do some further checks in the future, but it does not in any way take away from the issue that Council has to consider tonight and will consider.
Okay, and I do, in that question, seek that you absolutely ignore that petition being such a ridiculous thing that's been represented and just wasting council time and money. Second is the petition for the Old Coach Road. We have allegations of speeding. I'd really like to know what the top speed is anyone can do, because as an exercise just recently, I tried to drive down that road and I consider myself a fairly experienced driver on those types of roads, and I couldn't exceed 40 kilometres an hour. And with that being a public road, I think it is fair to expect the public to use that road, and I don't see why the council think that it should be compromised with public use, given that our region does exist on tourism. That's a very scenic road. I think that to close that road would be unjustified, because it's another road that you can take, Old Coach Road, you can take Hickey's Cutting, you could go down Wildall Road.
Ms Biddle, do you have a question?
I do have a question. I'm getting to the point. And it seems unfair to me that being a public road, people are not given the choice of which road that they should choose to use. And the primary production of that adjoins that road 100% being number 61 Great Ocean Road, Skeens Creek. Do you really expect that people carting up trailers, tractors, loaded vehicles have to stop and start every time they go down there? There's 5 access gates to that Old Coach Road from number 61 Great Ocean Road, and I think it's unreasonable to think that primary production under the grounds of safety should be restricted in not being able to use that road freely along with the rest of the public. And so why do you think it's fair and reasonable to actually do anything other than make that road a better usable road? If we're in 2021 now, we should be looking forward futuristically and going, this property may not be primary production forever. We need to move forward and look forward so that we are going to produce a better road for future road use.
Ms Biddle, have you got a question that you'd like an officer to respond to? It's about access of farm vehicles down that road, mainly. It's a question regarding farm vehicles access down that road.
It's all vehicles. I just think it's unfair. It's a public road.
Okay, can we have a comment from the CEO?
I think it's important to note that you're making statements when the concept of question time is to ask questions. So council will be considering this matter in a moment. The statements you've made have all been considered by council and will be considered by council tonight.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your questions. That'll be all discussed in the debate tonight when the item is, I think it's then item number 1 and 2 on the agenda. Thank you. Now we have other people with their hand up for questions. Is there anybody else that had their hand up? Oh yes. We've got time for a couple more questions. So probably really for just one last person. I think that was you, Mr. Connor, behind Tony Webber. Is that right? If you can just make sure you just ask a question, please, for an officer to answer. Just one last question, thank you.
The other question was more regarding the bollards at the end of Surf Avenue. I think that's basically a no-go, but anyway. What legitimate reason is there for putting bollards at the end of a street, blocking someone's gateway?
Thank you for the question.
A gateway that's actually, there was a gate there like 35 years ago as far as I'm aware.
Thank you for the question. Council has received a petition. Attached to that petition as part of the documents that Council received tonight, Council Laws received for tonight as part of its agenda, is a report from officers that consider all those matters. I encourage you to obtain a copy of that report from us, and you will see that those questions have been answered, or the answers to those questions have been offered to councillors so that they can consider that as part of their debate.
Yep. So as per the last time this come up, I sent an email and another guy did as well. If there are bollards put there or boom gates put there, they will be removed and council will be charged for that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That now concludes the question times from the gallery. Okay, we've received no petitions or joint letters. Now I ask, are there any declarations of interest, please? Councillor Costin.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I've got a conflict of interest in item 10.1, the petition for traffic management up Old Coach Road. Some 14 months ago I signed the petition, so I'm not in a position to debate this.
Thank you, Councillor Costin. I propose that we move to confirm the minutes from the council meeting held on the 24th of February 2021. Do I have a mover? Councillor White, to be seconded by Councillor McCracken. Is that to be opposed? If not, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item is carried 7-0. Okay, we now move on to item 10.1, petition traffic management Old Coach Road, Skeens Creek. Councillor Costin, I note that you have a conflict of interest. Would you just like to state that again before you leave the room, just for the sake of the gallery?
Thank you. I've got a conflict of interest in this item, 10.1. It's a petition for traffic management in Old Coach Road. I signed the petition some 14 months ago when it was first went out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Costin. We'll now wait for you to leave the chamber. I'll note that there is a revised officer recommendation. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm just wondering about the ease of movement of larger vehicles and perhaps farm machinery in their day-to-day business. Will they be able to move freely up and down that road?
Yes, Mr. McGann.
Thanks, through the Mayor, and thanks for the question. That's certainly the intention. The recommendation is not to close the road, but to install, as one of a number of recommendations, to install self-opening gates, which would require traffic to slow as they approach the gates, and then the gates would automatically open via means of a sensor.
Councillor McCracken.
Thank you. I guess it's to you again, Tony. I just wonder we've obviously had a couple of people raise concerns about things like heavy vehicle access and that sort of thing. I mean, are you confident that this motion sort of, and everything else, the treatment sort of can manage that appropriately, or are there perhaps slight alterations that we need to make? I just want to make sure that, you know, that question is sort of resolved, really, because I want to get an understanding of it.
Through the Mayor, yes, we are. It's the measures that we're recommending would certainly be sufficient to allow legal vehicles to pass across the road.
Councillor Hart, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. My question was, if the automatic gates allow traffic through, could we get an explanation of what is the purpose of them? What is it that these gates will do to address the concerns that have been raised?
Through the Mayor, and thanks for the question. The intention is that they'll simply discourage some of the through traffic that's currently using the road, because they'll effectively be an annoyance for through traffic and reduce the numbers, as well as reducing the speed.
I've got a question, and it's just to really confirm an answer that you've already made. When you talk about vehicles that can go on the road, like a tractor is allowed on the road, so I assume then these self-closing gates would be wide enough for a tractor to get through.
Through the Mayor, yes. From memory, the road is in the order of sort of 3.8 to 4.5 metres wide, plus shoulders. So quite a wide formation. The intention is that any vehicle that's able to be legally used on the road would be able to negotiate these features.
Are there any more questions of officers? Councillor McCracken.
Sorry, I'm trying to find it through the report. How much is it costing the gates? Can you direct me to a page, because I can't find it. Sorry to be a pain.
Look, through the Mayor, it's a little while since I've read the report, but the automatic gates, from memory, were going to be in the order of sort of $15,000 installed. All up.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question in regard to the 12-month trial period. If it became evident reasonably early on in the trial period that perhaps there were a few mechanical issues or challenges around navigating that from perhaps a heavy machinery standpoint, is there scope or flexibility to actually do something about it inside that 12-month period prior to the end of the trial?
Through the Mayor, the answer to that is yes.
Are there any more questions? Councillors, we have a revised officer recommendation before us. Do I have a mover? Councillor Potter. Do I have a seconder? Councillor White. Is it to be opposed? Councillor Potter as the mover.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, look, I'll support this recommendation. This has taken a long time to come back to council for this discussion and vote, and I know I was one of the councillors who held it up, wanting some more information and particularly some consultation with emergency services. I do have a concern that that people in the vicinity have the ability to go about their day-to-day tasks, especially in relation to farming and other activities. And I think the officers have satisfied me with that. I also travel to and from Apollo Bay a lot, and I have personal experience where some drivers behind me have then raced down Old College Road and tried to beat me to the Skeens Creek Great Ocean Road intersection. And I do know firsthand the problem of those sorts of four-wheel drive drivers, which would create issues for the residents. So I think it's worthwhile undertaking this 12-month trial of the items that the officers have put in front of us to address the issues. Let's see how that goes. I encourage any feedback in relation to difficulties with trucks, tractors and other machinery getting up and down the road, but I do support this trial, and we'll see how it plays out.
Councillor White as the seconder.
Just to reiterate what Councillor Potter has said, this has been going on for a long time and it's clearly an issue for lots of people, and I believe that the council officers have done a great job investigating all and every option, and we've had lots of reports on it, and I think it's now time to go ahead and trial something and monitor it as we go. So that's why I'd like to see it progress.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mayor. I think this provides an on balance outcome. Really, I think it doesn't, hopefully, pending the trial, but on face value at least, it doesn't seem to prohibit the current uses of people who require that road as a means to move from A to B or whatever reason that might be. But secondly, it deals with some of the issues that have been raised for a long time now as well. So I'm happy to support this based on the fact that it takes into consideration a number of, or both sides of what has been quite a controversial issue.
Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. My concern around this particular resolution is to do with the gates. I think all the other matters are fairly straightforward and sensible, and I think we've had assurances today from council that adjoining landholders who may be moving vehicles such as tractors or the like associated with their properties will not be impeded by these gates. And I think that if we do adopt this resolution today, it really is on that basis, and at the first hint that that isn't the case, then I think the matter would have to be looked at, even if it wasn't, even if the 12-month trial hadn't expired. And really those assurances, they almost should form part of the decision, but I note that the meetings are recorded and now so are the video. So I hope it does work, but I do have those reservations about those gates.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I will now call for a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The item is carried 5-1. We'll now move on to item 10.2, We'll just get Councillor Costin to come back in. Okay, we'll now move on to item 10.2, petition to erect bollards Surf Avenue, Skeens Creek. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. The question has been raised whether the petition that we're considering today is in somehow represented of the petition of the 25th that was considered the 25th of July 2018. Has anyone actually checked that is not the case? So are we confident that and it would be quite easy to look at the two documents and see if the signatures are in different orders or what have you. So has anyone actually checked that? Because that has been raised with council now.
Ms Bissett.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Hart, and through the Mayor. No, we did not double check or cross check them, but as you've pointed out, that would be easy enough to do. We didn't feel the need to do that when we were evaluating the petition on face value.
Councillor Hart.
Through you, Mayor, given that we know the date of the meeting it was considered, which was the 25th of July 2018, and presumably we know where the attachments for that would be. I mean, I can't find them. I've had a look. If we adjourn this item simply until the other items at this meeting are dealt with, could someone check that? Because I'm not making any suggestion whether it is or isn't, but I think we have a responsibility to check it. And if that is possible, I would be moving that we consider the other items on the agenda and come back to this item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. I think Council has a legitimate question before it, and the legitimacy of how it got here can be checked, but I think is irrelevant to the question. And my advice to Council is deal with the matter, clear the matter out. If we subsequently find that there's other issues, we'll deal with those in an appropriate way.
Councillor Hart.
Well, Mayor, I mean, we've been presented that we've got a petition today. No one in this organisation can give an assurance that it is a petition that we have not dealt with previously. So, on that basis, I'm moving that we adjourn this item to the end of the meeting and that we ask that the council officers, as a matter of urgency, we know the date of the document, retrieve the other petition, just so that we settle that once and forever. It would be inappropriate for us to be considering this matter if it's not a fresh petition.
So you're moving you're moving a procedural motion to adjourn it. Okay, we don't need a seconder. I'll put it straight to a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 6-1 to adjourn it to the end of the meeting. We'll now move on to item 10.3, deliberative community engagement. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. This process takes or requires an allocation under the budget for funding to support. When was that discussed, and when did council and council officers make that allocation of money?
Mr. Surin.
Through the Mayor. So Council has allocated $155,000 in this year's budget. That's for the development of the community vision, the council plan and the health and wellbeing plan. So that was obviously done through the budget process leading up to adoption of this year's budget.
Are there any other questions? Councillor McCracken.
Yep. What involvement, if any, did councillors have in the appointment and engagement of the consultant which is to lead this process?
Through the Mayor. So we started this process very late last calendar year, just after the council had been elected. So there was an allocation of funding, and like what happens in majority of projects, officers get some funding to go and do a project. So in terms of answering your question, officers went out for quote and appointed the consultants to do this work. So we discussed this with councillors after the appointment of the consultants.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Hart. Councillor White.
Sorry, just want to be clear, that would be within your delegation to go out and appoint those consultants?
Yes, that is correct, through the Mayor.
Councillor White.
Yeah, I'd just like to raise that I'd like to put an alternative motion and go to option A, which is... Okay,
we can do that.
Broader. Okay.
Yeah, we can do that. I've got a question. Can you please explain what this is all, I believe, part of the new Local Government Act, and for the benefit of the gallery and the 1,000 people watching, what deliberative engagement's about and under the new Local Government Act?
Through you, Mayor. So the new Local Government Act 2020 has introduced considerable changes around the way local government is expected to engage with its community. And relevant to this report is a requirement for councils to do deliberative community engagement, and that deliberative community engagement then must be capable of being applied to the community vision, the council plan, the council plan, the financial plan and the asset plan. So the Local Government Act doesn't describe in detail what deliberative community engagement is, but it gives some high-level principles that local government is expected to achieve as part of its deliberative process.
And can you just briefly describe what that is? Because it's quite different to what we've done before, deliberative engagement.
Yes, through you, Mayor. So deliberative community engagement, there's some key characteristics that you see in deliberative community engagements. It's usually independently facilitated, so it's a process that sits outside influence of councillors or staff, and the other key characteristics are that a panel of independently selected people are given adequate time, detailed information, and also the support to come together and deliberate on an issue or issues as a group, discuss trade-offs and come up with a very informed recommendation for council on the issue that we put in front of them. So that is quite different to other forms of community engagement, and it's far more collaborative than other forms of community engagement, in that we put a higher level of trust in the community to come up with solutions for council to consider, and also in that we lend that panel of people an increased level of responsibility, so council commits to considering their recommendations in full after the panel process is done.
Are there any other questions for officers of Councillor McCracken?
Yeah, aside from a panel that's being suggested here of 24 people, what other sort of models are there for deliberative engagement that you may or may be aware of that others may not be?
Through you, Mayor. So the panel process, which is otherwise known as a mini public or a citizens' jury, is the most commonly practiced form of deliberative community engagement in Australia and probably internationally. There are other things called deliberative polling, which is very similar to a panel, except every time a group is brought back together, they're polled on a certain issue to see how their opinions shift over time as they debate and reason through information. That's another sort. You know, but whichever way you do it, the key characteristics are time, influence, information, and support. But really, the panel process is the most commonly practiced in Australia.
Are there any other questions of officers? Councillor White, I believe you have an alternate.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I'd like to propose that we move the recommendation to take up option A as opposed to option B. It's been recommended in the paper. I'd like to, can I add some comments to that? Can I get a second first?
Yeah, so it's to move, just to be clear, it's recommendation 1, but to remove option B and replace it with option A. Is there a seconder? Councillor Costin. Is it up there? Is it clear to everybody? No, not yet.
Hours.
Okay, Councillor White as the mover. Oh, sorry. Moving ahead, is it to be opposed? Councillor McCracken. Okay, Councillor White as the mover.
Thank you. Look, I just want to start by saying I'm a strong supporter of community engagement, and I think the legislation is really strongly encouraging councils to undertake very clear efforts to get feedback from the community. This process has got to inform 4 really important documents, at least for council, and particularly the 10-year community vision. I'm really committed to getting as best and rich input that we can from the community, and I believe the processes outlined in the documents that we've been given will give us that. I think that if we're going to undertake something, we need to do it properly, and I feel if we don't do it, option A, option B is a bit of a token gesture, and it feels that we're doing a ticker box process, whereas I think option A gives us a much richer and more detailed information from the community, and gives us a real sense of partnership with the community to get their feedback and information. So on that basis, I would really like to support option A and go for that much more detailed panel option.
Councillor Costin as the second. Reserve Councillor McCracken, you opposed?
I did. I appreciate the comments made by Councillor White. However, I think this process has probably not been so ideal, and we've heard that councillors were not completely involved from the beginning. under delegation, which I acknowledge the appointment of a consultant was made, but I guess if we're going out to our community with a number of important considerations for council plan, long-term financial plan, community vision, these are things that you would want to involve councillors in from the very beginning, and that certainly hasn't happened. I guess along the process too, there have been some councillor suggestions that have been ignored in briefing sessions, and look, I know Councillor Costin, you made some suggestions about maybe having some targeted approaches that could be put up to briefing sessions. That never happened. The cost of this one is $52,800. I don't think I can stand up in front of the community and say that $52,800 is a good spend of money in this particular circumstance. I just wonder what that could go towards. It could go towards building footpaths or renewal or roads, any sort of works. But we want to spend it on talking to our community. Now, I'm not against community consultation whatsoever, but I already thought that we had a deliberative panel, and they were elected in October 2020, and it's called a council. I think the local government sector has performed particularly poorly in this space, because I acknowledge that this is imposed on us under the Local Government Act, and that's probably something we can't do anything about. However, we really need to send a strong message both to the sector and also to our community that this really isn't a great spot to be in. The state government has provided no funding support whatsoever for all councils across the state to do this work. And to me, $50,000 or thereabouts is nothing to be sneezed at all. It's quite a significant amount of money. And to provide no support, to provide no solution for this is quite poor. I really hope that we can perhaps consider other ways of doing things. This is something that's got to be done every 4 years. So this is not just a one-off cost. This is something that happens every 4 years to inform the next council plan and the one after that. If I were the community, I'd be quite annoyed at this because, I would really like to see what their view is on us spending $52,000 on this when it could go to many, many more worthwhile projects.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I hummed and hard over this, and I've listened to Councillor McCracken, and it is a lot of money, but it's not just for a council plan over 4 years. It's for a 10-year plan. It's an investment in 10 years, and by no means are we locked into doing this process every 4 years. Yes, we have to engage with the community every 4 years, but we don't have to use this process. And this process is predominantly around a longer-term plan. And after tossing it around, I think I supported the allocation of money to this in the first instance through the budget process, and I do support that we spend the money in this time to properly, fully and extensively engage with the community to achieve the best outcome for the community in the long run. And if you divide 10 years into 50 odd, it's only about $5,000 a year if you want to break it down like that. But I will be supporting the alternative motion put up by Councillor White.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Other councillor's got to speak first. Yep, Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think with any process of public consultation, it can be difficult to ensure we're hearing from as many people as possible. And the new Local Government Act requires Council to undertake a process of deliberative engagement when formulating the council plan and associated documents. The principles are outlined in today's agenda on page 32. And I think one key point is that there's an expectation that more comprehensive information is provided to help the formation of recommendations by a panel. whilst it is true that councillors have been elected, we've been elected within the rules and the requirements of the Local Government Act. And I think engagement with the community is meant to be ongoing and it's meant to be thorough, not just once every 4 years. Council's been presented with 3 options. The third option, in my view, is pretty much more of the same, with councillors being the panel. I don't think it reflects what is expected of the new Act. And I always see the Local Government Act as a minimum standard. It doesn't mean it's the best standard. We should aim to do better than the minimum standard. I know we're being criticised for the cost, but if this process is done well, it could help this municipality and the council to be on a constructive path for years to come. Properly prepared plans can help to secure funding during elections. We've got 2 elections coming up within the next 1 or 2 years. So the Colac 2050 process provides strong foundations in the area of town planning, and we use such a process there. Option A, which has been moved by Councillor White, should provide the best process, and I'll be supporting that.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I've been reasonably clear on this point throughout the last couple of months. Of course, I, like everyone else on the council, am massively in favour of a robust and structured consultation process which outlines 4 at least very important documents for our council and our region. I'm of the view that we're able to achieve all those components and all the detail within it and all the consultation that's required to inform all those documents from a lesser financial burden that is prescribed under option A. And I congratulate Councillor White on her motion. She's been an advocate for this one the whole way along, and I commend her for that. But I can't reconcile with the financial burden that is likely to have, particularly when Councillor McCracken has outlined a number of other needs within the Shire that would very much like to have that $50,000 allocated to it. So I don't support the current motion that is before us.
Any other councillor wish to speak? I might just say a few words there. So this deliberative engagement is something that's required under the new Local Government Act. It certainly would have been great if the state government had have also helped fund councils, particularly regional councils coming out of COVID. I support community engagement. We've been out and about the community at engagement sessions with the community. The deliberative process, I've monitored a deliberative process 2050 through the 2050 process. It had its pros and cons. So what we have before us, how do we meet the requirements of the new Local Government Act? And I've deliberated myself over it for a long time, and I think the officer's recommendation is something that I could support. So option A, it's a very expensive process at $52,800 plus costs, and it isn't something that's going to be spread over 10 years. We're going to have to put in another 4 years' time. That's been explained to us very clearly. We'll do it again when we go for our 4-year council plan. So I actually think we can meet the requirements of deliberative engagement with not with option A. I'm supportive of deliberative engagement. When you have a panel of only 20 people, it's not a lot bigger than a council. The really good information will come out of, some really good information will come out of the community sessions where we're speaking, to hundreds of people, getting surveys from thousands of people. The regional council are strapped for cash. So what will come out of all the consultation processes, and that will be, we want improved new playground, we want new equipment, we want improved recreational facilities. And when you're spending all your money on consultants, there's not a lot of money left to do all the things the community wants you to do. So I think, while I'm supportive of diligent engagement, I can't be supportive of this Rolls-Royce model. Councillor White.
Okay. Look, in terms of cost, I don't see it as a cost. I actually see it as an investment, and I see it as an investment in our community.
Oh, hang on. Actually, I missed Councillor Costin. You had you reserved. Yes, sorry, Councillor White.
I'll have another go.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, like Councillor White, I'm a very strong supporter of community engagement. I think it's essential, and it's essential to do it well and not half do it. I would actually prefer to spend a little bit more money than option A and do some more targeted engagements, but I accept that's more the Rolls-Royce model, and option A is much less than Rolls-Royce, and option B is even further down. I think the beauty of doing it well this time round is to make sure that we target the groups that aren't represented by council, and that's why we do need to go down this process. If you look around the councillors here, we're all similar age, we're probably all of similar socio-economic status. Apart from Jamie. Sorry, Jamie. Yep. Oh, Joe's the youngest, isn't he? Sorry, Joe. You've been here a long time, Joe. My apologies. But we don't have a gender balance, and we don't have cultural balance. We don't have other people from disadvantaged groups, and we don't have traditional owners. So I think it's imperative that we go out and consult as best we can with our community. We're consulting for a plan up to 2050. It's for our children, not just our children, for our children's children. It's the first time we do it under this new Act. We will have to do it again in 4 years' time. But if we do it well this time, do it right, we can cut back next time round. It'll make it easier as we proceed on. I think it's well worth the additional investment at this time. It's a very, very small amount we're talking about in comparison to the council's total rate revenue, and I think it's an investment well worth spending. Thank you.
Councillor White.
Just to wind it up a bit, and in terms of the financial burden, I really want to strongly suggest that it's actually an investment in our community. And I would suggest any good business that is looking forward 10 years and developing these plans would invest in good stakeholder advice. They will go out, they will invest in it and get the best advice they can possibly get. And our stakeholders are the community, and I agree with Graham. We need diversity of opinion, and what's been given to us is going to get that diversity when the panel is formed. I agree with the government has put us in a difficult position by including this in legislation and requiring us to undertake deliberative practice without giving us the dollars. That was set us up a little bit, but like all councils, we're in the same boat, and I know a lot of councils are going down the same pathway, and I've had some good feedback from the processes that they're going through. I think in relation to a community thinking that we should be spending this money elsewhere, I think what we really want to see from this process is getting the community to think above and beyond footpaths, playgrounds, potholes. We want to get some really good discussion going about vision for the future and what that means in a much broader context for our community going into the future. And that's what I hope that this process will bring. Lift the discussion, broaden the vision, and give us some really rich information to take us forward to develop some really good plans. And so that's why I think we should invest in this and do it well when we've got the opportunity.
Thank you, councillors. I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The item is carried 4-3. Councillors, I'll now move on to item 10.4.
Can I just call division on that one? Because I think the community have a right to know.
Division? All those in favour? Councillor Costin, Councillor White, Councillor Hart, Councillor Potter. All those against? Councillor McCracken, Councillor Bell, Councillor Hanson.
Sorry, Mayor, just to note that there is a second recommendation.
Yes, I missed that bit. We'll now move on to recommendation 2. Do councillors, we've had question time, so councillors, do I have a mover for recommendation 2? Councillor White, is it to be seconded? Councillor Costin, is it to be opposed? Oh, Councillor McCracken. Councillor White as the mover.
Clearly, to undertake and implement the first recommendation, we have to move to accept the second recommendation, and I really support the recruitment of the panel as outlined by the council officers.
Councillor Costin is the second. Is it Councillor McCracken?
Thank you. Look, I'm not going to support this, obviously, because I didn't support the first one, but I think the real problem with these sort of community panels or citizens' juries, whatever name you want to call them, is that they talk about inclusion and diversity and getting everyone on board, but the fact of the matter is that you can't always get a representative group of people there. Part of the reason that is because it requires a lot of time and commitment to be involved in one of these processes. And I think it was said before that, you know, the 2050 process has been used to come up with a plan, but there's a number of people who have dropped off along the way on that process. And, you know, I'm looking at people with young families and kids, people who work full-time, people that might be, you know, younger, that may not have the time to be able to contribute to this process. You usually end up getting a certain demographic. They may be a bit older than me, Councillor Costin, but I don't think that you get a broad spread of the community, which is one of the big flaws of this process. And the point was made before that, you know, there's 24 people that would be chosen on this panel. It's not really that much bigger than the council that we're sitting in at the moment with 7 people. So I just see it as a really flawed plan, and I'm not sure that it's really going to deliver the diversity of views and opinions that we're looking for, particularly when the very structure of this, by its very nature, prohibits the participation of a lot of people who, well, we've got a lot of people out of the community that work in shifts, so that's not going to be applicable. A lot of people that work on weekends, that's going to cut a lot of people out. A lot of people with growing families, that cuts a lot of people out. So where are we going to draw people from? Sure, there are some, you know, different ways of looking at how we can split up the community, you know, age, gender, education level and that sort of thing. But from my understanding, if you can't get people who are within those different categories, you have to accept the people that apply. And that's really unfortunate. So, look, I'm guessing that this will get through, but I've got some really big concerns about the makeup of this panel and how truly representative it's going to be of our community. And just one last point too, I know that there might be some sessions that might be held online, but our shire is quite a big shire, and just by nature of that, some of the sessions that might be held in Colac deliberately put a disadvantage to people that live at Wye River or Lavers Hill or Apollo Bay. I mean, it would be good to get a fair and reasonable geographic spread that doesn't favour necessarily one area or the other, and I don't see that presented necessarily here. So I've got concerns. I wish it the best, but I'm not sure that we're going to get a great result.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be supporting this resolution. I think the way this process works is it is designed to actually tease out, to ensure that you get the different demographics and the different people participating. And just on the issue of will people from Wye River or what have you be able to be involved, I represent council on another committee, a project group to do with the works to be done at Kennet River, and we regularly have committee meetings that includes people from who own properties in Kennet River, and they might be at Melbourne, they might be at Wye River, they might be at Kennet River, they might be the council officers in Apollo Bay, and other consulting experts might be based in Colac, for example. They're all over the place. I mean, if anything's been learnt from this COVID experience, if anything good has come of it, it's the capacity to improve engagement and to use technology to overcome some of the barriers that Councillor McCracken's raised, and quite fairly, because in the past such opportunities haven't been able to be utilised. So I think we can take some comfort that the technology can help with that process.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? I might just quickly speak on this one because I think it's important community engagement, but I think I need a new microphone. I think Councillor McCracken does highlight some of the challenges we've got with juries. I certainly support all the geographic spread and the representation from varied parts of the community. I think, like Councillor McCracken has said, it's hard to get. It was going to be hard to get that because jury duty is not compulsory. You can only draw from the people who put their hand up. But this is only one part of community engagement. This is the deliberative process. We've been out, we've been out with community consultations and surveys that have gone out drawing from an enormous part of the Shire, and this will be one part. And then ultimate responsibility falls to councillors. So while this is one part of the process, the ultimate responsibility for these plans falls to councillors. So the community, they will be represented in this process by their elected members. Councillor Costin as the seconder.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I understand Councillor McCracken's concerns. It's not a perfect process, but it's the best process there is at the moment. It's considered to be best practice by state government, so we're following best practice. It may not be perfect, but it's better than doing nothing. There is a geographic spread that's been proposed at the moment. It's still not as well focused as I'd like to see it, but it is much better than where we started. And people from the coast are targeted, people from rural areas are targeted, as well as people from Colac. I think given the list of objectives we're trying to get a truly representative demographic base on the panel with the items that are listed on our resolution will get us where we need to be. So I would recommend this proceed. I support it, but I accept it's not perfect.
Councillor White, right of reply.
Look, no process is going to be perfect, and I think if the material that I've read that's been presented to us, it's a jolly good go at it, and as I said before, I really believe that we've got to give it a go and give our community the opportunity and partner with the community to set our vision. And I want to do it well as we can, not in a token way.
Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The item is carried 5-2.
I'm going to call division again, please.
Division is called. All those in favour, Councillor Costin, Councillor White, Councillor Hart, Councillor Potter, Councillor Hanson. All those against, Councillor McCracken, Councillor Bell. I think councillors want a 5-minute break. Yep. All right. We'll have a 10-minute break. It always works out to be 10 minutes. We'll come back at 25 to 6. Councillors. Okay, we might start again. Councillor Costin, Mr. McGann. I will. Thank you. We might start again. We might. Thank you. We might start again. CEO, Mr. Brown, you had something to say?
Thank you, Mayor. Council officers have checked the records, and it is clearly the case that there are two different petitions, one presented in 2018 and a different petition presented this year. Councillors, if you want to have a look at it, it's part of the confidential documents that are attached to your agenda. And the only other thing I would say is that the officers in compiling the report eliminated some signatures, but in summarising it, came up with a number of 76. There's actually 58 signatures for the current petition. So it clearly is a valid petition that Council can consider.
Mayor, can I move that we consider, I think it's item 2 now, and then resume the agenda in its normal order?
So Councillor Hart's moving a procedural motion. We'll put it to a vote. All those in favour? Yep, the item is carried 7-0. So councillors will now consider item 10.2 on the agenda, petition to erect bollards Surf Avenue, Skeens Creek. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just of that explanation that there's, I think, instead of 76 signatures, there's 58. Could I just get some clarification? I think that's what the answer was. Was there parts of the old petition included with the new petition, or how did you come up with that lower number?
Through the Mayor, the number that's reported, the 76, was the number of signatures, but there were some duplications. So when they were removed, the total number of individuals who had signed was the 58.
Are there any further questions of officers? Councillors, we have a recommendation before us. Do I have a mover? Councillor Hart. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Potter. Is it to be opposed? Councillor Hart as the mover.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. There's been various matters outlined in a petition that Council's received, and I think what we need to keep in mind today we're just dealing with one thing and one thing only, and that's whether or not bollards should be erected as a way of blocking access to an existing farm gateway. I think that how the council deals with such a request really has potential implications for anyone who has a rural property with a farm gateway. I think that if there was an issue with the gateway, then the way would be dealing with the issue, not just putting bollards in front of someone's gates. But what I hear from this, or what I understand from this report, that the landholder is entitled to have the gateway there, and therefore the only sensible thing to do is to determine that bollards will not be installed, and that's essentially a similar situation to when a similar matter was considered on the meeting at 25th of July 2018. So the short answer is that the property owner is entitled to have access from that road, and so we shouldn't be putting bollards there to block that access.
Councillor Potter is the seconder.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I'm happy to support this recommendation by the officers. I think it's put quite properly to us. The placing of bollards in front of a gateway, and this gateway is an important gateway to the farm, and in the event a fire as a potentially exit point for people working on the farm, and it has been used in the farming context for entry and exit to the land for quite a number of years. I think there may be other factors at play here, and perhaps there is some sort of underlying disagreement between neighbours, and there's state government and other bodies that can deal with neighbourly disputes, and I recommend that that be considered by the residents there. But I don't think neighbourhood dispute is a council issue, and I do support what the officers have put in front of us, a comprehensive report, thank you, and I endorse what Councillor Hart said.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Costin.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'll be supporting this recommendation. I think landholders have a legal right of access into their property from roadways. However, I was a bit disappointed that there was a lack of consultation during the process of considering this petition, and there's perhaps a couple of issues that Council could have helped along that have been mentioned in the petition, and I wonder what the next steps are if the recommendation is approved. Will Council go back and give some advice to the various parties involved?
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I will now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item is carried 7-0. Councillors, now we move to item 10.4, 3652 Bruce Street, Colac, land sale options. I'll just note that there is a revised officer recommendation. Do councillors have any questions of officers? If there's no questions of officers, councillors, we have a recommendation before us. Do I have a mover? Councillor Potter, is it to be seconded? Councillor McCracken, is it to be opposed? Okay, Councillor Potter is the mover.
Thanks, Mayor. Can I start off by thanking officers and my fellow councillors for discussion in relation to this item, and I welcome the revised officer recommendation. I think it's well laid out and encaptures my thoughts and the process moving forward, because there's no doubt that this Shire has an urgent need for the development of residential land and the securing of key worker housing and accommodation, and also affordable and social accommodation in the Shire. And whilst there are private people and mums and dads investors and some developers with some projects on their minds or underway, council are in the position that we own some land in Bruce Street that is very suitable for residential development, and that's what we should be doing with it. Should get it out on the market as soon as we can, and do our bit in leading the way in trying to address the shortcomings in this Shire, because our big business has made it quite clear that this is a priority for them to support their enterprises and attract people to this Shire, and in this instance to Colac, with a large number of jobs vacant in the Shire that can't be filled because we don't have the people. This recommendation does set out perhaps the next step, and councillors, I think we need to support the officers now and be clear with our expectations around what we want to see, what outcomes we want to achieve from the sale of this land, and I hope we have those discussions very soon and give the officers clear direction they know the importance of this, and they've given an undertaking to work hard and fast on this within the confines of the legislation and the Local Government Act, which specifies how we can go about developing this land. So, councillors, I hope you're all on board with this recommendation, and again, thank you for the discussion earlier, and let's get on the market.
Councillor McCracken is the seconder. Yeah.
Look, I'll just say in support of Councillor Potter that I think it's a well-established fact that there's a shortage of housing stock in Colac and land, and in particular affordable housing or affordable land options. So this is a step in the right direction. I certainly hope that the process can be sped up, and I know that officers have certainly heard that message loud and clear from the various discussions that have been had. So look, let's hope this goes on trouble-free and can carry on, and hopefully we can release some land in the not too distant future which will help the supply clog in our shire.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor White.
Just briefly to say that I really support the notion of selling Bruce Street, and really heartened to see that we're going to include social housing and affordable housing and make that a highlight or make that part of the whole process. I think it's something that council does need to do to lead and show the community our concern for those people that are struggling to get into affordable housing. So I'll be supporting the recommendation.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I think it is the case that Colac needs more residential land, and council owns a parcel of residential land at 36 to 52 Bruce Street. There's also a need for housing for people on low incomes, as well as more housing for people working in the area. The land at Bruce Street is already the right zoning. A lot of work has been done since a similar parcel land had some issues some years ago. It's been re-subdivided. I think it's well known that there's a former landfill near it, but this is land that had nothing to do with the landfill aspect. I think it's good that I commend the revised officer recommendation, and I know the public don't immediately have access to it, although it's on the screen. Particularly, it's acknowledging the urgent need for residential land in the Shire, and noting that having a residential development on this particular site is a high priority of this council. So I think this is an important resolution, but we need to get this moving as soon as possible and keep in mind the need for social housing and worker housing in the area.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Okay, councillors, we have a recommendation before us. I'm sorry, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item is carried 7-0. Thank you, officers. Councillors, now we move to item 10.5, contract 2111, Memorial Square play space. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. The recommendation is that we take $90,000 from the sealed road repair program and $70,000 from the resealing program. If we didn't take the $160,000 off roads, what would council be doing with that $160,000?
Through the Mayor, those amounts are part of Council's Capital Works program for the current year. In any Capital Works program, and our program probably has 100 or so different projects on it, if not more, there'll be overs and unders in each of those projects. They basically never finish exactly on budget. So essentially at the end of the financial year, all of those over and unders are just accounted for in the final financial figures. What we've tried to do here is identify a couple of sizable areas which have had savings where those programs are now complete, and that those areas, the savings out of those areas, if you like, could be isolated to pay for this particular project.
Councillor Hart.
So through you, Mayor, is it Council's contention that there are no other local roads in the Shire that need major cracks or repairs, and that there are no other roads in the Shire that need resealing, and for that reason the 160,000 that was allocated in the budget for those two things, there's just not a road across the municipality that needs that money spent on it?
No, through the Mayor, that wouldn't be my advice. But what we do in each financial year, and this year is no different, is that we draw up a list of roads that we're intending to reseal for that particular year. That work has been done. The saving in this case essentially came out of some provisional items in the contract that we didn't need to take advantage of or we didn't need to use. But certainly, if Council wished to, there are other roads that could have money expended on them.
Councillor Hart.
Do we know where those roads are? I mean, just a broad location. I'm not asking you the street address.
Through the Mayor, look, probably the best way to answer that is that in terms of reseals, we've already got a list of roads which we propose to reseal in the 21-22 financial year. So if Council was of a mind to do so, they'd be the roads to start on, I would suggest. Having said that, we'd probably be in a position where it wouldn't be feasible to have those roads sealed in the current financial year because the sealing contractor plans their work and essentially moves on to other areas, in addition to the fact that we're probably getting to the end of the road sealing season.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Did officers consider going for re-tender, and if they did, what were the circumstances that led them to say no, we can't, and to seek further money from the budget?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Potter, and through the Mayor. We absolutely did consider re-tendering as one of the many options to try and achieve this play space within the available budget. There's a couple of reasons why we decided that wasn't the best way to go. One of them was that to re-tender would take or cause a delay of about 6 to 8 weeks to the project, and the funding requirements are such that we need to deliver this project by December, so the compromise to the funding commitment was substantial. We also did a detailed assessment of all the costs that we'd received in all the tenders to see where some of those higher costs were, and they were across most aspects of the project, not so much the equipment, but in every other aspect, drainage, paths, all of those things, and consistently. And then that was also backed up with some discussions with neighbouring councils who had noted that place-based construction costs were coming in around about 20% higher than what we would normally expect. So all of those things combined didn't give us a lot of confidence that if we went back out to tender, we'd get a good result or be able to meet our timeframes.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Potter.
Sorry, Mayor, thank you. Just in relation to the play space equipment, there is a preferred supplier of equipment, I think is based overseas and seems to be the preferred supplier for lots of councils and all the rest of it. Is there a lack of suppliers of that type of equipment in Australia, or is council going to consider looking internally in Australia first before in future tenders, just to see if it is possible to secure locally produced equipment?
So through the Mayor, we did go back to some Australian companies once we received all the tenders and wondered why some of the Australian companies hadn't provided a cost to and a replica of the design but using Australian manufacturing. And because this project has a large civil component, they would only be a subcontractor to a civil company, and they had a look at it and really didn't feel that they could come close to replicating what was proposed in the design. So the design was only a proposal. It wasn't necessarily that companies had to use that. We asked for an equivalent design that could replicate the thing that we were looking for, and the Australian companies just weren't able to do that for us.
Are there any further questions? No. Councillors, we have a recommendation before us. Do I have a mover? Councillor Potter, is it to be seconded? Councillor White, is it to be opposed? Okay, Councillor Potter, Councillor, is that real? Opposed, okay, Councillor Hart. Okay, Councillor Potter is the mover.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm having trouble with my firesides coming online now. Look, it's unfortunate that there is a cost blowout in this project. This project overall is very expensive, and to have to go back to the budget and try and find some more money to deliver this project in accordance with our funding agreement and requirements is pretty difficult, and I thank officers for the work that managed to come up with this money, although, as I said, I don't like having to do this, but officers came up with a very, very good design in the first instance, and it was well received, but quite rightly we went out to the public and said, well this is what we think, tell us what you think. And they did, and we had lots and lots of submissions to this project, and officers then set about incorporating the ideas from the public into the design, which then led to a cost blowout as well, because other things had to be factored in. So thank you to officers for listening to the community and incorporating their ideas into the play space. I think that's what community engagement is about. Unfortunately, that has contributed to a cost blowout. Other factors that we've already heard from officers as well. So we really need this play space to be updated and these designs implemented. It is in the showpiece, or one of the showpieces in the Shire, being the Memorial Square. It's one that locals use, tourists use all the time on a daily basis. So, while it's not ideal, it would have been good to perhaps had a crack at re-tendering and see if we could secure something a bit cheaper, but we heard why we can't, and I accept that explanation. I think that's quite reasonable. But councillors, I think we'll be foolish if we didn't use this money and complete this project. So I hope you'll support the recommendation.
Councillor White as the seconder. Reserve. Councillor Hart as the opposer.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and I must thank Councillor Potter for being completely clear on what this issue is, a cost blowout. And he was right to point out to the community the significant cost blowout with this project. $510,000 available for an important project, a playground at Memorial Square, and we're going to take $160,000 from the roads budget, which, although the road might not have got finished by 30th of June, that money could be used and should be used for road repairs. So someone in the Shire, we're not quite sure who, is not going to have their road repaired because council is going to take $160,000 out of roads to pay for this cost blowout. This reminds me of a project that cost a little bit more, an important project too, and being on council, it's about choices, it's about living within its means. Council should live within its means. And always these projects have merits. We have lots of projects that have merits, but I would put it to you that a $510,000 playground would still be a significant and worthwhile project. So the other project that comes in mind, Blue Water Fitness Centre, also an important project, which had a cost blowout. It was meant to cost $10 million initially and cost $13.5. 35% cost blowout. I suppose we should take comfort that this $160,000 is only 31%, but really we need to draw a line in the sand. We need to appreciate that rural ratepayers need their roads maintained and repaired, and I think unless we send these messages, these cost blowouts just keep coming and coming. And I was against the cost blowout of Blue Water, and I can't support this cost blowout on this project.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor McCracken.
In an odd sort of way, I agree with Councillor Hart that the cost blowouts aren't ideal. I've been equally as critical of projects that have had blowouts like this. When the redrafting of the budget for this particular project, or the need for more money, I guess it came from more feedback from the community, is what I understand. It was put out there as a plan, and then there was comments saying we want more this and more of that, and so then it was sort of refitted to a different requirements. I do note that they didn't need a citizens jury for that though. We made a decision without that, which is great, and probably a lot less cost. So look, reluctantly I'll probably support this, only because it's the premier sort of space in our Shire where visitors usually stop, and at least along the Princess Highway, but I guess I'm a little bit hesitant to support it because I want ratepayers' money spent carefully and considerately, and I'm not saying it's not being spent necessarily that way, but I mean if the scope of works has been drafted in such a way that it's resulted in this, maybe there's other questions to be asked along the process, but I guess there's money being saved. I'm of the understanding that the works that were going to be done with the sealed and unsealed program, no, they're both sealed roads program, the crack repair and the resealing, they have been done, but just there's been savings made along the way. So I probably have a little bit of contention with the fact that work hasn't been done. It has been done, it's just at a reduced cost, but it's certainly not an ideal situation.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor White, you reserved.
Thank you. I think in terms of suggesting that there's roads that haven't been resealed or people are going to miss out, or somewhere along the way across the community people are being cheated on the roads, is just a bit of a misrepresentation. I think Mr McGann's explanation as to how the funding has been found to support the project was pretty clear, in that there are should I say, swings and slides in terms of how you manage budgets, and this is how you are challenged with some blowouts, and no one wants a blowout, but in terms of the size of the budget that this council manages, I think the officers have done very well to try and meet the needs of the project and continue on with the project. There's been considerable investment in engaging with the community and coming up with a fantastic outcome, and I think the community now have an expectation that that is going to be met. It's been going on since June 18. It's a long time. I think that's often a frustration with the community, and I wouldn't like to see this held up any further. So I'd like to see us progress with this. It's going to be a fabulous asset, and as people have pointed out, it's in a premier location. It's an important project.
Councillor Potter, you have a right of reply. No. Councillors, I will now call for a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The item is carried 6-1. Thank you. Councillors, we will now move on to item 10.6, Gifts, Benefits and Hospitality Policy Review. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Any questions? Any questions? Oh, we've got a revised officer recommendation. Councillors, do I have a mover? Councillor Potter, do I have a seconder? Councillor Bell, is it to be opposed? Okay, Councillor Potter is the mover. No. Oh.
No, I'm right. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Bell? No. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Sorry, I'll just point out that the revised officer recommendation increases the token threshold amount from $30 to $50. That's just to bring that in line with the Victorian Public Sector Commission, and councillors also still, their gifts, any gift that councillors receive will be available on the website. So I just wanted to point it out. That's to bring it in line. The $30 hasn't moved for a very long time, so that's why it has been changed. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I will now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item is carried 7-0. Councillors, now we move to item 10.7, review of mayoral and councillor allowances. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor White.
Just to clarify that there's been some good benchmarking done and how we line up with other councils in terms of officer allowances. Councillor allowances, sorry.
Are there any other questions? If not, councillors, we have a recommendation before us. Do I have a mover? Councillor McCracken, do I have a seconder? Councillor Bell, is it to be opposed? Councillor McCracken.
Basically, this just leaves the allowances as is because not too distant future it's going to be taken over by a tribunal which determines the outcomes anyway, so it makes little sense to change it for a short period of time.
Councillor Bell as the seconder? No. Does any other councillor wish to speak? No. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item is carried 7-0. We now move on to item 10.8, Policy Review 16.4, Guarantee of Community Loans. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. My question is there any imminent deadline? Sometimes there's a requirement in the Act that something has to be adopted by a certain date, or is it open to councils to send this back and ask that the draft be changed?
Mr. Lawrence.
Through the Mayor, no, there is no requirement for it to be put through tonight if Council didn't wish to.
Can I foreshadow an alternative when you're ready, Madam Mayor?
Yes. Are there any other questions from any other questions of officers? No. Councillor Hart, you have foreshadowed an alternate.
Yes, Mayor. I think people have a copy on the blue sheet, which I'd like to move when you're ready.
Okay, Councillor Hart, you've moved an alternate motion. Is it to be seconded? Councillor McCracken, is it to be opposed? Councillor Hart, as the mover.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. This particular policy, the draft that was with the agenda, and I'm suggesting some quite significant changes, relates back to an instance back in about 2011 when Council guaranteed a loan and didn't have a policy, and that eventually cost ratepayers $88,000 in 2013. I think the issue we've got to consider as a council is, why do financial institutions want a guarantee when someone is going to borrow money? Why do they want someone else to guarantee the debt? And the answer is because they've assessed that there's a significant risk of the debt not being repaid by the person who borrows it. And we've got to ask ourselves as councillors, should ratepayers really be underwriting debts for different groups that can't get finance? The winners in all of this are the banks. The banks still make the money, they still make their margin, and ratepayers pick up the bill, which is exactly what happened in 2013 following the decision in 2011. So I would put it to you that, well, my view is that basically council shouldn't be guaranteeing loans. We have a community grants program. If there's facilities where people want to improve them and they meet the various criterias, then it's much more efficient that we give them a community grant towards that. And I know there's a lot of community groups do great works with their shire halls and club rooms and the like. But I don't think we want to open the door to guaranteeing loans. So what I'm suggesting, that if we were to do it, it would only be in exceptional circumstances. The resolution there that we're talking about now suggests that might include something like a disaster such as a bushfire or a major flood. So if club rooms were destroyed in a bushfire, for example, it might be that the community group wants to borrow some money so the new building meets modern standards or disability access and the like. And that entities in financial difficulty shouldn't be getting eligible for debt guarantees. When you guarantee a debt for an entity that's already in financial difficulty, you're not really helping that entity, you're helping the person who would otherwise not get, or typically a bank, who would not otherwise get repaid. We shouldn't be using ratepayers' money to bail out banks. There's some other suggestions here that if there is a guarantee, it should require council approval. So my suggestion is that if we do agree with this resolution, the policy would have to come back for approval. but we don't want to give the community the impression, and the draft policy and the agenda risk giving that impression, that all these groups can go off borrowing money and expect it to be underwritten by council. That's not a responsible use of ratepayers' funds.
Councillor McCracken as the seconder. Reserved. Does any other councillor wish to speak? No. Councillor McCracken? You reserved? No. That's it. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item is carried 7-0. Councillors, now we move to item 10.9, update section 6, instrument of delegation council to council staff. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I can see in the report through you, Mayor, that there's various changes in the Act that have been updated in this delegations. Does this instrument seek to change any of the existing exceptions that councillors have put in over many years? Just one example, if there's 4 objections or more, a planning application comes to council. So are those things being changed, or is this just updating Act references and things like that?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Hart. No, it doesn't seek to change any of those items. And with our new system, the software that we use, we can actually print off for council those items that have been introduced by council into the delegations, and I can actually hand that to you and show that it hasn't been changed.
Are there any other questions of officers? No. Councillors, we have a recommendation before us. Do I have a mover? Councillor Hart. Do I have a seconder? Councillor McCracken. Is it to be opposed? No. Councillor Hart is the mover.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief on this one, Mayor. Delegations are the way that council formally gives power or authority, if you like, to various officers to do their jobs. I don't think we want to be making decisions on everything that council does, but the instrument of delegations has exceptions, such as if there are 4 objections to a planning matter, it comes to councillors in a planning committee. I take comfort from the assurance we've been given that this isn't seeking to change those today, but this is ensuring that the instrument is up to date with changes in the Local Government Act and various legislation. So on that basis, I'm supporting that we adopt this resolution.
Councillor McCracken? No. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Okay. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item is carried 7-0. Councillors, now we move to item 10.10, Audit and Risk Committee Minutes, 2nd of December 2020. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillors, we have a recommendation before us. Do I have a mover? Councillor Hart. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Costin. Is it to be opposed? Councillor Hart as a mover. No. Councillor Costin, no. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item is carried 7-0. We move to item 10.11, Notice of Motion, Resolution for Municipal Association of Victoria, the MAV, State Council, regarding enforcement of noxious weed control. Councillor Hart, this is your notice of motion. Do you wish to say something? Then can councillors ask questions, if they have any?
Yeah, if they want to, and when you're ready, I'm happy to move the resolution.
Do councillors have any questions regarding it? Okay, so Councillor Hart, you wish to move this motion. Is it to be seconded? Councillor Potter. Is it to be opposed? Councillor Hart is the mover.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I've put a pretty reasonably comprehensive background into this, but the gist of this is that the state government department used to come around to people's properties if they had noxious weeds and give them both advice and encouragement to control their noxious weeds, and if they didn't, ultimately there was a penalty involved. That process has not occurred to that extent. I've heard different people trying to pinpoint the date, but we think it might have been about the early 2000s when it stopped. And the result can be seen throughout the municipality. You have many landholders that are doing the right thing. You'll have someone with a clean farm, and then down the road there'll be a road full of ragwort where I live. Other areas there might be thistles, blackberries and other things. And what prompted me to bring this to council, and I have brought a similar resolution some years ago, is the local Progress Association at Lavers Hill wrote to the Minister about this, and the Minister said, oh, well, just go and talk to Landcare. You know, Landcare do a great job, and they do a great job. But Landcare work with people who want to control their weeds. Landcare work with people who are trying to do the right thing. They're largely volunteers. They don't have an enforcement power, and they can't be expected to do enforcement. Purpose of this, if this is passed, not only do we take a resolution to the MAV, but I would hope that when councillors or the CEO is meeting with various parliamentarians, brings this issue up. It's the lack of enforcement. It's the people who don't do anything to control their weeds that this is seeking to address. And there's been a lack of action by the state government on this issue for, well, probably for 2 decades.
Councillor Potter is the seconder.
Thanks, Mayor. Very happy to second this motion and congratulate Councillor Hart on bringing it to us and taking it to the MAV. It is an issue that's not just confined to Colac Otway Shire, and I would imagine it's be supported by most, if not all, rural councils across the state. I do have a concern, and it might be unfounded, that the MAV's become a bit more city-centric, and you know, I'm not sure how this will be discussed, but I do hope it gets on the agenda. Good luck with the vote, and hopefully there'll be a real outcome from this via the state government to address this issue across the state.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I will now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item is carried 7-0. Now we move to item 10.12, Notice of Motion Australia Day. Councillor McCracken, this is your notice of motion.
Thank you. I just, after having had a quick discussion with others, would like to make a couple of changes. The first one would be instead of the word independent, I'd want to put standalone, so that council conducts a standalone review. So it's in that first line there, yep. And just a standalone. And the second change was in point B, and that was a report to be prepared for the September 21 council meeting or earlier if possible. You'd have to, do yep. And that's it as the changes.
Do councillors have any questions for Councillor McCracken? Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Joe, Councillor McCracken, just in relation to standalone, I'm assuming you mean officers do that report?
Yeah,
just to be clear in my mind.
So it was just to clear up the confusion with independent, which might, excuse me, which might suggest there was some sort of outside consultant employed. It was standalone as opposed to the current processes that are in track at the moment to do with council plan and the ones that we discussed earlier tonight. This is a separate process from that.
Councillor Costin.
Just in the part about community consultation, I'm just wondering how you envisage that, Councillor McCracken. How much should officers spend on that? Should they set up a panel for that?
No. To answer your question, look, you might have a number of ways that do it. You might have surveys, you might have the ability to write submissions. I'm not going to be focused just on one way of receiving it. I think it's a conversation which, and I don't want to get into debate, but I just think there are multiple ways that you could do it, and I'm not suggesting that a panel is necessarily one of them.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Just a question for officers, which may not be able to be answered. I am just curious, though. We are undertaking extensive community engagement at the moment, and there are some trends coming through that, I believe, already, those community surveys. Has this topic been... have officers seen this thread in any of those surveys come through yet? Or a thread about Australia Day, I guess.
Through the Mayor, no, we haven't. Not that I've seen to date.
I'm ready to move it when you're ready, Madam Mayor.
Can I just ask one last question? Have you discussed this notice of motion with the Indigenous community?
No, I thought it best to not try and have any sort of bias towards anyone in the community. It's really a conversation for the community and for us to sort of establish a process and a way forward. Not for me to sort of talk to one group but then not another in forming this.
Are there any other questions? Councillor McCracken, as the mover, do I have a seconder? Councillor Hart, is it to be opposed? Councillor Potter. Councillor McCracken as the mover.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I note that this has probably come about because earlier, might have even been in a previous council, that we determined that the question of whether Australia Day as an event would run next year, it was unresolved. We resolved to have an Australia Day 2021 event, which has already been, but beyond that, we had not made a clear resolution. So I guess the purpose of this notice of motion is really for councillors to establish control of the process and to have a way forward which engages the community to have a conversation. The conversation is obviously going to air different views, and we have to acknowledge that there are different views on this matter. But I don't think we should be afraid of having a discussion if it's done in a respectful, considered, responsible way, and that's certainly what I'm envisaging with this particular process. I hope that we can come to some sort of view about the way forward before September, but September to me would be the cut-off date, so that we can make some sort of arrangements in the future as to what might happen, and I don't want to predetermine what may happen. I have spoken to people from other councils that do have, for example, dawn services to mark the day for the Indigenous community, but that's one council in another part of the state that does that as a possibility. We really need to invest the time to talk to our community, because as we've got it on their record, we don't have any way forward for this, and it's time we sort of lead the process rather than just letting it happen. Let's take control, let's lead the way, and show the way forward, that we can have a respectful conversation, and it's okay to have differences of view, but ultimately we're going to have to come sometime later in the year, make a decision about it and move forward. Thanks.
Councillor Hart is the seconder.
Yeah, I'll reserve, Mayor.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I understand the intent of this notice of motion. I think, in my mind, it may have been more relevant after we get the officer's report. We were told some time ago that there's going to be an officer's report addressing Australia Day, a wide-ranging discussion with councillors about how Australia Day may or may not look, how we wanted to progress it. We're getting that report in April, I think, and to my mind, I would rather wait for that report and then perhaps this, what Councillor McCracken has put in for us might rise out of that. And I note Councillor McCracken mentioned what One Shire may do with, or propose to do with the Indigenous community and a dawn service. Our local Indigenous community are invited to participate in Australia Day every year. Their involvement has been dwindling, and last Australia Day they chose not to participate in any event, and words put to me was that it was viewed as too hurtful. If we're going to have a discussion about this, which clearly, if this motion is successful, we're going to, a public discussion, you know, it may well lead to a public view that we move Australia Day or we don't have Australia Day, and I think council need to be prepared to accept some views of council that they may not necessarily like. So understand the threat of it, but would have rather waited to see the officer report.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mayor. I am denied about this one. I'm still probably slightly sitting on the fence, but I think as this year has even unfolded, it's become an increasingly divisive social issue in this country, and no doubt in the Colac Otway Shire as well. I do take Councillor Potter's view that we are expecting some further information from the officers sometime in April. I think probably a couple of hours ago I was of the view that it might be a good idea to wait for that information to better inform perhaps what we're trying to do. But I do, having had a few conversations with Councillor McCracken, I do take his view also that it's a good opportunity now for council to control the narrative a bit, take responsibility for what has become a really important social issue, and I don't think it hurts to actually start that process today. We can feed other information in down the track if that needs to be fed into, but nevertheless I think it's a really good opportunity to take control of what is a really important and divisive matter in the Shire. So I support this.
Councillor White.
I was a little bit of the same mind that we should perhaps wait until we get the report from the council officers. However, and that may well have recommended some further community consultation, and if it didn't, probably would want further community consultation. It is an issue that I think everybody has an opinion on, and more people are making up their mind about how they feel about Australia Day should or shouldn't be celebrated. I think we do need to be open and ready to hear what our community has got to tell us, and because it is such an important issue, we need to ensure that that consultation process is a very broad consultation process and does get the views of a whole cross-section of our community. I think that doing that is going to be very important, and it does reaffirm my commitment to community engagement and consultation at how important it really is. And us as 7 elected members can't sit here and make decisions on behalf of our community without consulting them. So I agree a consultation process is an important process to really get the feel of what our community's got to tell us. But maybe it might have been a better process to wait until we got the report from the council officers.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? I just might briefly say, while I think community discussion around this issue is a good thing, and that I'll support it. What I find, I think it's a really complex issue, and there's a lot of hurt around the day. And I think what would have been a nice thing to do was at least have had some sort of discussion with the Indigenous community before this notice of motion sort of hit the public agenda. And I think that would have been a respectful thing to have done. But that hasn't happened, and so I hope that of course those conversations will start. So I would have preferred to have waited for the officer report to have a good discussion about it and about how we move forward in the most sensitive way possible. Councillor Hart is the seconder.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think there's no doubt that there's different views on this issue, and I've raised that at council over the years. Whilst I understand the comments about perhaps waiting for a report and what have you, I just note that what's happened in the past is we have preparations for Australia Day. Australia Day happens, and there's an event as occurred this year as well. And then council, understandably, gets tied up with all the other issues of council, and then by the time we get around to considering what we're doing for Australia Day, it's almost too late to have a proper process of consultation. So whilst I acknowledge there's some plans that something will come to us, I think in April, I think it needs to be clear to the community that we as councillors are driving the opportunity for this discussion, and ensuring that the organisation understands that we don't just want to come to September, October, November planning Australia Day without having gone through this process. So that's why I think this particular resolution is so important. On the issue of discussing with different groups, whilst I haven't had any discussions in the last week or so in preparation for this meeting, over many years it has been something that's come up, been raised with me at different times, typically around Australia Day, as that tends to be when it's raised. So I don't necessarily think when you get a resolution on the notice of motion on the books, anyone that's put one on the books, and I think most of us have, perhaps the new councillors will get that opportunity very soon, with all the timing to get that on the book, and it's a very formal process. I don't necessarily think you have the conversation immediately around the week or so when you put that on the agenda. It's a very formal process governed by various rules, and I don't have an issue with the fact that there's been no immediate conversation on this notice of motion, because I think there's been enough conversations of that throughout recent years.
Councillor McCracken, you have a right of reply.
Thank you, and I appreciate Councillor Hart's comments there. It was certainly not my intent to disrespect any members of the community, and indeed it was to provide a level playing field for all members of the community to be able to contribute without having any preconception or bias towards anything. But I guess it's been said that we're getting a report to a briefing session sometime in April. This notice of motion doesn't stop that happening at all. Indeed, what it intends to do is start a process with the community to have them involved from earlier on, rather than just councillors being involved in a process. And I guess there is a time factor involved in this as well, in that we're in March now. What's it? 24th of March today. You know, this briefing might have been, I think it was the 21st of April, you guys have scheduled it. After the 21st of April, you know, you get into May, there's the best part of 2 months lost when we could have been having some sort of discussion or preparing for the discussion. And I think it's probably a good time too to have the discussion away from the date to remove some of those sensitivities that do exist in the community, and where we can sit down as you know, our community and have that discussion when it's not so heated around Australia Day. So look, I really hope this gets supported so we can actually have a genuine, meaningful discussion with our community, and every part of the community has at least the opportunity to be involved. And whatever the outcome is of the consultation, I don't know, but I think we've at least got to have the discussion.
Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The item is carried 5-2.
Can I call a division, please?
Division is called. All those in favour? Councillor Costin, Councillor White, Councillor Hart, Councillor McCracken, Councillor Bell. All those against? Councillor Potter, Councillor Hanson. I'll now move on to item 10.13, Notice of Motion, Apollo Bay Streetscape. Councillor McCracken, this is your notice of motion. Do councillors have any questions?
I have a question of officers. Can I ask that? I guess it's probably more to you, Tony. Is there anything in this sort of motion that causes concern with capability or legal requirements or anything like that? Is there any concern in it at all?
Through the Mayor, no concerns at all.
Councillor Costin.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. This is sort of starting to encroach on operational issues, and I'm pleased to see the modification for at least 2 hard cleans. Ideally, we should be defining the standard of cleanliness, and however many cleans it takes over the year to maintain that standard of cleanliness is where we should be going. But I'm not sure how you define the standard of cleanliness of a footpath. Do you say whiter shade of pale or something like that? And perhaps in the future it's a little bit more than the footpath also, because remember there's parklets there now, and we will consider soon whether those parklets stay there for a bit longer, and if they do, they will need cleaning as well. And thinking to the future, if they stay there for even longer than that. For Part B of the notice of motion, thinking a little bit more on that, I wonder if it should be that the community is consulted on an appropriate timing for these cleans, rather than just be given reasonable notice, because a lot of the shops are closing on Tuesdays now. They'd like to have that disruption undertaken on Tuesdays, or they may even ask for that to be done early in the morning, 5 a.m. or something like that. So I think there needs to be some consultation on the timing, whether it's consultation with the chamber or with individual businesses. I'm not sure.
Well, I'm happy to add a third point to accommodate that.
Tony, do you want to answer that?
Oh, through the Mayor, thank you. I might be able to assist. Our practice with this work is to do it during the night, so that it wouldn't, it'd have minimal impact on any of the adjoining businesses.
Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I wonder if Councillor McCracken would be prepared to add a point that might say something like that consideration will be given to the to minimise the chemicals or something like that, or to to have some consideration of what chemicals are used in the process. something along those lines. I'm not going to prescribe which chemical you use or don't use, but I think it should at least be a matter that's considered.
Look, I know we probably had that discussion, and when I had the chance to move this, I was going to include part of that, which would be at the end of point A, after course of calendar year, with an environmentally sensitive cleaning solution. Is that something that would be acceptable?
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Tony, the motion calls for a hard clean. Can you define a hard clean and explain how that may be different to what we do now?
Through the Mayor, the method that we're using now is that we've bought some new equipment which is effectively a high pressure water cleaner. So I think that the term hard clean to me corresponds with the equipment that we've bought recently, probably in the last few months. Whereas in the past we've had to hire a specialist contractor to come in with that type of equipment. Essentially now we own it ourselves and we're able to use it at Apollo Bay, in Colac and at other locations as required.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. And following up from that, Council have already rostered or allocated 2 hard cleans per year. Is that right?
Through the Mayor, that was our plan, and certainly that's what we intend to do. Correct.
Councillor White.
Just a question to be clear, you have got new equipment that will enable you to do these sorts of hard cleans throughout the Shire that we haven't had in the past?
Through the Mayor, yes, that's correct.
Councillor Potter, did you have another question?
You're perceptive, Mayor. Yeah, I think I did. Mr. McGann, do our staff down in Apollo Bay respond to calls from traders or members of the public if there is some sort of spills or some out of our scheduled cleaning needed to be done?
Through the Mayor, we would. Look, I can't say offhand how many of those we've had in the past, but our intention with this type of work, it takes 2 people to do it generally. It's where the intention is that we'll do that, if you like, during the middle of the night. The impact of that, of course, is that those people, they're not available for other duties the next day and so on. But we think it's good work to do, and we're looking to improve the appearance of those key areas.
Councillor McCracken.
Tony, sorry, Mr. McGann, I just want to make sure I get a clear understanding. I think you might have mentioned it, it was outside somewhere before, but the first sort of hard clean, at least in living memory, was, what, 2 or 3 years ago perhaps, and before that, not very often, if at all. Is that a reasonable understanding, or have I got my wires crossed there?
Through the Mayor, that's correct. From memory, the streetscape at Apollo Bay was built some 20 years ago, and it was certainly in quite a dirty condition, probably 2 years ago, and that's when we brought a contractor in and, if you like, restored the appearance.
So can I just ask a question? Regardless of whether this notice of motion gets up or not, the street's going to be cleaned. Is that correct?
Through the Mayor, that's correct.
Yeah, and then we might move it, yep.
So I guess it doesn't hurt if this motion gets up then.
Oh, through the Mayor, certainly not. It's one thing to plan something, but it ain't done until it's done. So this will certainly help to keep us on track.
Councillor Costa.
Mr. McCann, does this show up as a separate line item in the budget? Street cleaning?
Through the Mayor, no. This particular activity wouldn't, although in the detailed activity accounting that we have, we do have a line item for street cleaning, but that's more in line with the sweeping, with the mechanical sweeping of curb and channel, which also occurs at night.
Councillor Bell, you had a question.
Not a question, thank you, Mayor. Not a question as such. I just, as an observation more than anything else, and Mr. McGann, correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels as if there are already provisions. I think we've been through this, but it feels as if there are already provisions in place to deal with this issue. I think Mr. McCracken, good on you for putting this forward. I think it's a good idea. Obviously, it's a really important streetscape, one of the most, if not the most, used or perhaps important ones in our entire shire. So certainly is not without merit. But I do think that there is a possibility for unnecessary additional perhaps work or it could create some sort of precedence that that again would already fit into the current management process that has already been outlined by Mr. McGann. So I'm reluctant to back this one based on.
We could be getting into debate here. I think we're straight into debate. Have you got a question?
Not really.
Okay. Councillor McCracken, you're the mover. Is it to be seconded? Councillor Hart, is it to be opposed? Councillor
Hold
White.
on. To be fair, I was going to change the wording of it, so I want to make sure that that's clear first. So the first one I was going to include was Councillor Costin's point. So can we? That was to make. Can you repeat your point again, please, Graham? I think that pretty well captures it. Does that give you, Peter, a clear understanding of what it means? And it's probably my fault too, but I just noticed that the wording on point C, that the community is given reasonable notice. Maybe it's just that council gives the community reasonable notice. So it just reads a bit better. Gives, yeah. Just take "and" out. Yeah.
Perhaps through the Mayor, we should just explain that the process uses a lot of water, and we need to tell. I guess we've done it a lot. So most councils have done this stuff. So you need to tell the traders because they need to make sure that no water gets into their shop. So it is we do have to work. It's just a natural part of what we would need to do to work with the traders.
All right, I'm happy to move that as is.
And who was the seconder? Councillor Hart. Is it to be opposed? Councillor White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I note that people might think that this might be operational, but I think this is like the premier tourist strip that we have in our shire in Apollo Bay, our premier tourist town. And I guess to give a bit of background, I had been raising this a little bit in the past and hadn't really got a strong answer, so that is the reason for the notice of motion. And then, interestingly enough, you find that we're already doing this, so you know, it's not exactly ideal. But anyway, the point that I do want to make is that confirming this notice of motion doesn't cause any harm, and we've heard that from officers. And in fact, it signals to our community, particularly our coastal community, that it is actually a priority. Now, it can be put into a work plan, and that's fine, the job's going to get done, but it also signals to the community that, yeah, this is actually a priority. Given that the Australian and federal governments have put out travel vouchers as well to encourage tourists to regional Victoria, it seems like a reasonable idea to make sure that we make preparations for not even the whole town, but just for the main part of Apollo Bay to be prepared for that. I'm very thankful for Councillor Costin and particularly for the third one there to give, you know, consult with traders to establish appropriate timing. You know, that makes perfect sense, so appreciate that inclusion. But I just think this is a bit of a no-brainer. It doesn't cause any harm, and if I wasn't aware that the equipment to use this had been purchased, so you know, that's fine. Why would I be aware of that? You know, I don't work in the depot. But just to put this on the record that this is actually going to happen, it's a backstop if nothing else. It ensures that it happens. It doesn't cause any harm, so let's just get on with the business of, you know, making sure that our towns are good, support local economy, support tourism sector and local jobs.
Councillor Hart as a seconder.
Yeah, just before I start, I'm just a bit concerned that the point that was talked about, environmental consideration, I'm not sure where that disappeared.
It wasn't either, sorry.
So, can we just ensure that that's in there? Because I mean, Councillor McCracken did move that he wanted that included, but it's not in what's on the screen.
You're right. I'll seek leave to have it included then, because I'm the mover. So sorry, just after calendar year, up point A, with an environmentally sensitive solution.
Councillor Hart.
Yeah, look, I acknowledge the comments that have been made about this is operational and all the rest of it, and well, essentially everything's operational until councillors decide that they're going to give some direction on the matter. What this resolution does, this sets that it is a council position that there's at least 2 hard cleans of this area. We've heard how it was overlooked for, well, probably a decade or more, maybe 2 decades. So I would expect that if this resolution gets up, that it's not going to slip off the agenda at any stage. If we vote against this, we're actually saying no. We'll give the flexibility back to the organisation to cease doing this for whatever reason, and it may not even be the managers that are here today. It may not be the councillors that are here today, but that is, by voting against this, you're giving the message that you're effectively voting on a resolution to say council is free to stop these cleans at any time. In a sense, if you're going to vote against this, you should really vote for that so it's clear what you're voting on. But this also introduces some improvements. Talk to the traders about the timing of the cleaning, have consideration of environmental issues in terms of the material used. There's no downside in supporting this resolution, but the message you send by voting against it is to the CEO, whether it's Mr. Brown or some subsequent CEO, is you have complete freedom to stop these cleans. No notice to council. No notice to council because councillors have decided they're going to wash their hands of the whole issue. You can stop these cleans at any time you want. And voting against this resolution, that is what you are really voting for. CEO, who may not have been selected yet, you can stop these cleans whenever you want. Why would you do that? You saw what happened when it was neglected for 10 or 20 years. I'm puzzled why anyone would vote against this resolution.
Councillor White as the opposer.
Stop these cleans. It sounds like a logo or something. Look, I want to make it really, really clear that I support excellent maintenance for all our outdoor spaces, and I would expect that there would be quality upkeep, and of course Polar Bay being our premier tourist destination is a really important part of that. I don't think it should require a NOM. I think our operational services people respond to requests, and my experience is that there has been excellent responsiveness when they've been asked to do things in my short experience of council. I think you set a precedent, and I can hear the community saying, well, why should we have a special notice of motion for Apollo Bay? We should have a focus on excellent and high quality maintenance of all our outdoor spaces. I think it's getting far too prescriptive. I would imagine that we would want the environmental impact of all the things that we do to be considered, and I would also imagine that something like this has always included traders and people that are going to be impacted, and I get a sense that those people in the past have been included in those activities. I can't imagine that that wouldn't have happened. I disagree that by voting against the motion I'm saying you can drop this at any time. I think that to infer that is a bit ridiculous, really. I think that quite clearly we would all support good, scheduled, quality maintenance, and I think we would be the first to pick up with our officers and the CEO if, having had this discussion, it's been useful in and of itself, that we would be onto it very quickly to ensure that those spaces are well cared for. So I just think this really is an operational matter. I think it's something that the council officers work hard at scheduling these things. Some things do get lost, and we get reminded by our community and our constituents fairly regularly if they feel things are getting behind, and I think this council and our councillors are very committed to supporting our community in actioning things that they don't think are up to scratch. So I just think that a notice of motion for something as specific as this is not necessary. It is probably not a good use of our governance structure. I think it's really an operational issue that our council officers should be all over, although it has been a good discussion.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mayor. And I may as well finish off from where I was before. But Margaret, I completely agree with you. I think, and I think I've already probably made my point, but just to finalise it, and not to take anything away from Mr. McCracken, I think it's certainly a worthwhile nom in that it is a. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but it's a worthwhile nom in that it's a really important place that needs to be maintained at all times, perhaps above and beyond what other areas may or may not be. But I think it's what happened 2 years ago or 3 years ago is probably irrelevant in my mind, and I think there are now provisions in place that are able to deal with that. And I think even having this conversation at all brings that out into the light. To have a specific nom for what is definitely an operational part of what council does, I don't think is that relevant. And I think you open yourself up to a lot of other potential requests that again would fall under the operational management of council. So to that end, I agree with Councillor White. I don't support this one.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, sorry, Councillor McCracken, but I can't support it. I know we've previously had discussion about this. Look, this is a clear leap into the operational space, and we've heard from officers quite clearly that there are two cleans scheduled. Our staff down at Apollo Bay take their job very seriously, and they respond to queries by traders in relation to things like this. And I have a personal experience a couple of years ago where some traders complained to me, and I rang staff, and cleaning was undertaken within a week. And what concerns me is precedent setting this, and what concerns me that Colac footpath's not mentioned this, Birregurra footpath is not mentioned in this, and people in Colac are entitled now to ask, well, where's our two rostered cleans of the footpath in Colac? Come on, councillors, get it on the agenda. And I think if it was about presenting the Apollo Bay CBD in pristine condition and so forth, which I support, and we all know how important Apollo Bay is to the community and here and abroad. But where is the notice of motion to include the washing of the rubbish bins when the footpath's being done, and all those other little things to dress up the main street if that's what this is about? So I think it's really, really risky, and it's going to create a precedent, and yeah, can't support it.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor McCracken, you have a right of reply.
Thank you. There's a few things I'd like to respond to. So this idea of a precedent being set, we're not just talking about anyone's sort of neighbourhood footpath here. We're talking about probably the most, or one of the most prominent areas and streetscapes in our municipality, which probably has, if not equal, maybe more than any other part of our Shire's foot traffic, with visitors being encouraged, actively encouraged to visit there. So I see that as very different to having a councillor get a call up to fix a crack in a footpath here, or fill in a pothole there. This is one of the centerpieces of our tourism communities, and it's not, you can't just wash it away and say that it's not that important. Yeah, it wasn't. Pardon? Wasn't meant to be a pun there, sorry. There was a point made before about excellent public spaces and that we've got a commitment to those. This NOM ensures that this space at least has a minimum standard for excellence. So, just based on that fact alone, that you would want to have excellent public spaces, this NOM ensures that happens. So why wouldn't you want to support it? And I guess the other point is that there are many different matters that councillors have to consider that might be considered operational in nature. So just because some people consider this matter operational, oh, it's operational, we're not going to vote on that, we're going to vote it down because it's operational. I thought there were people around this table, we want to be enablers of the community. We want our communities to look good, to be aesthetic, to be inviting, to be attractive. This is what this notice of motion does. It enables action. It enables tourism. It enables pride. But I guess maybe, maybe next time, if we're going to do something like this again, we should hire a citizens' jury.
Okay. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The vote is lost. 4-3.
Division, please.
Division is called. All those in favour: Councillor Costin, Councillor Hart, Councillor McCracken. All those against: Councillor White, Councillor Potter, Councillor Bell, Councillor Hanson. Yeah, we'll have a break. If anyone, I know we've got to just one item, but yeah, I need a break as well. Okay, councillors, we might make a start. Oh, there it is. Yeah. Councillors, okay, we might start again. Now we move to item 10.14, report of informal meetings of councillors. Please note that this item is to report the informal meetings of councillors and does not require a council resolution. require a council decision. Councillors, we have an item of urgent business. Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move an item of urgent business. The resolution is that Council resolves that the matter of engaging a recruitment firm and a probity auditor to support it in the recruitment and appointment of a new Chief Executive Officer meets the criteria for urgent business as arisen since the distribution of the agenda and cannot conveniently be deferred until the next council meeting.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. I will accept that as urgent business. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Potter. Is it to be opposed? Councillor Hart as the mover? No. Does any councillor wish to speak? No. I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item is carried 7-0. Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, councillors. So the resolution I would like to move is that Council, having received quotes from suitably experienced recruitment firms, conducted interviews and considered all proposals, engages MacArthur's, I'm not sure what their full business name is, at the quoted price to support it in the recruitment and appointment of a Chief Executive Officer for Colac Otway Shire following the resignation of Mr Peter Brown, and 2, appoints a probity auditor to support the process.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Potter. Is it to be opposed? Do we need to know? Yep. Councillor Hart, as the mover, do you wish to speak?
Yeah, I think I should, Mayor, because it obviously wasn't on the agenda. I mean, we know that Mr Brown has resigned, and hopefully will be with us until this recruitment process is complete. We've gone through a process quite quickly. The office has got quotes from various recruitment firms. We interviewed those firms. All of us were present today, and we were able to come up with a preferred firm that it happens to be one that is well qualified and a leader in the industry, and we've used before. And I think in light of that, it makes sense that we make a decision on this today if we can, because that means the whole recruitment process can start, well, basically tomorrow morning, when I assume someone in the council will inform the firm that they've been appointed. So it's an important step in the process, very well qualified firm, and I think it's entirely appropriate that we deal with that this evening if we can.
Councillor Potter as the seconder.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, look, this is the start of the process of one of the most important decisions Council will make. It's still very, very topical out there in the community, and it could be a distraction to the general business of Council, but I'd just like to congratulate councillors and staff for the way they've worked to get us to this point so quickly. It highlights, in my mind, the importance in Council's mind of getting this process happening, and also highlights the way councillors and staff are working together to get outcomes on behalf of the community. So I think this was a good day's work today, Mayor.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item is carried 7-0. unanimously. Thank you, councillors. That concludes this ordinary council meeting of the Colac Otway Shire. I declare this meeting closed.